Some countries are not content with being just one. Kenya is one such country. It does not have a single face, nor is it easy to understand. From afar, it seems to fit together. Up close, it is full of contrasts. It is too modern in one corner, traditional to the core in another. It has dense forests sharing space with skyscrapers. Ancient tribes live alongside young people connected to the digital world, speaking slang. Some people cross the country to see lions. Others live near lions but have to cross the jungle to find water. It's the kind of place that changes its face every kilometer. It's a country that defies any attempt at definition. Today on Bello Mundo, we're going to travel through Kenya from the inside, just as it is, full of surprises, contrasts, and lots of things that will amaze you. Number 1. Location and general information. Kenya is in the heart of East Africa, right where the map seems to breathe between savannas, lakes, and mountains. It is crossed by the equator, but there is nothing predictable about it. Instead of suffocating heat all year round, the country surprises with variations ranging from arid desert to tropical forest, passing through cities with mild temperatures all year round. Right in the center of the country are the so-called highlands, home to Mount Kenya, the second highest mountain in Africa, at over 5,000 meters above sea level. The summit is covered with snow, which would be curious enough in itself. But the strangest thing is that all this happens almost on the equator. It is as if the country's climate thrives on contradiction. Further south is the Masai Mara National Reserve, one of the most famous conservation areas in the world, right on the border with Tanzania. It is the classic documentary setting, with open plains and endless skies, where lions, elephants, wildebeests, and zebras roam free. This is where the Great Migration takes place, when millions of animals cross the territory in search of water and pasture. It is a spectacle that looks staged, but is 100% real. In the north, the climate changes completely. The landscape becomes dry, almost desert-like, with rocky terrain and low vegetation. The heat is intense and life is hard. In contrast, the southeast coast is hot and humid, with white sand beaches and coral reefs. The city of Mombasa, for example, is the country's main port and has a mix of Arab, Indian, and Swahili influences in its architecture, food, and speech. And in the middle of it all, the Great Rift Valley runs through Kenya from north to south. It is a huge geological fault that has created deep lakes, dramatic cliffs, hot springs, and fertile land. Lakes such as Turkana, Nakuru, and Baringo were born there, and each has its own ecosystem. It is as if the country had been torn in half by nature and reinvented itself on top of that scar. Every piece of Kenya has a face, a smell, and a history. And it is precisely in this mixture of ecosystems that the country builds its identity. There are forests, savannas, mountains, deserts, and the sea, all in the same territory. No wonder so many people say that in Kenya, you can cross an entire continent without leaving the same place. Number 2. History. If there is a place where the past is alive beneath our feet, that place is Kenya. On the shores of Lake Turkana in the north of the country, archaeologists have found fossils of some of the earliest humans on Earth. The most famous of these is the Turkana boy, who lived there more than 1.5 million years ago. In other words, Kenya is not just part of African history. It is part of everyone's origins. Much later, on the Indian Ocean coast, the Swahili cities emerged. They were prosperous trading centers between the 11th and 15th centuries. In the 16th century, the Portuguese arrived, then came the Omanis, and finally, the British. Each wanted a piece of the territory. The British presence left marks that are still visible today. In Kenya, for example, People drive on the left side of the road, as in England. At the end of the 19th century, the British made the colony official. They built railroads, confiscated fertile land, and put Kenyans to work as cheap labor. The result was a social time bomb that exploded in the Mau Mau movement in the 50s. It was a revolt organized by peasants who wanted their land back. Many were arrested, tortured, and killed, but the resistance showed that the people would not accept submission forever. Independence came in 1963. The first president was Jomo Kenyatta, a symbol of the struggle for sovereignty. From then on, the country began to chart its own history, but the marks of the past remained. Inequality, the contrast between the countryside and the city, between colonizer and colonized, are still striking. And speaking of contrasts, perhaps no place shows this as well as Nairobi. Number 3. Nairobi. Nairobi is the kind of city that lives two realities at the same time. On the one hand, it tries to be the postcard of the future of East Africa. Mirrored buildings, connected startups, coffee shops with English names, a prestigious university. There is even an urban safari, with giraffes crossing the horizon while traffic stands still. And that's no exaggeration. There is an entire national park within the city. Lions, rhinos, zebras, all there just minutes from the financial center. But just turn down a street, leave the avenues of glass and steel, and the other Nairobi reveals itself, the one that doesn't appear in tourist ads. That's where Kibera is, one of the largest informal settlements in Africa. It's not a neighborhood nor a slum. It's almost a city within a city. 1 million people living without infrastructure, huddled against the wall of a luxury golf course. And the most striking thing is not even the poverty. It is the contrast. On one side, executives holding meetings with investors. On the other, families trying to find water to cook with. If you want to delve deeper into this reality, there is a video here on the channel just about Kibera. But be warned, it's not for everyone. You need to have a strong stomach and be willing to face the real Kenya, unfiltered, because it is precisely this kind of contrast that defines Nairobi. Number 4. Population, religion, and languages. In fact, it's not just in Nairobi that we find different worlds sharing the same space. The whole of Kenya is made up of contrasts. The same road that crosses the open savanna passes through a traditional village and ends in a neighborhood with mirrored buildings. Nothing is standardized. Nothing is static. This is also reflected in the people. The country has more than 40 different ethnic groups with languages, rituals, and ways of life that sometimes do not even intersect. The Kikuyu, for example, are the largest population group in the country. They live mainly in the Central Highlands and have strong political and economic influence. The Luo are more numerous in the west, on the shores of Lake Victoria, with a tradition linked to fishing and ancestral rituals. The Kalenjin, who live in the Rift Valley regions, are known for producing generations of champion athletes. The Luya, scattered across the west, have a culture rich in dance, music, and community organization. And then there are the Maasai, who are perhaps best known outside the country for their colorful clothing, rites of passage, and cattle-centered lifestyle on the southern plains near the Tanzanian border. Each of these groups has its own language, in addition to Swahili, which is the national language and serves as a bridge between ethnic groups. But even Swahili changes depending on where it is spoken. In Nairobi, for example, young people have created an urban dialect called Sheng, which mixes Swahili, English, and local expressions. And perhaps this is precisely the most vibrant part of the country. Number 5. Traditions, rituals, and festivals. Instead of fading away over time, Kenyan traditions remain present in the lives of many people. There are initiation dances, rain ceremonies, weddings in traditional costumes, rites of passage, and even dance competitions between neighboring tribes. This is not a staged tourist attraction. It is everyday life, especially in rural areas. The Maasai, for example, hold transition ceremonies to mark the passage from youth to adulthood. These are long rituals involving singing, body painting, and circular dancing, all in a community setting. The Samburu, who live further north and are closely related to the Maasai, hold seasonal gatherings to strengthen ties between clans. On these occasions, men and women wear huge handmade necklaces, which are not just adornments, but a kind of visual language that reveals age, social status, and even whether a person is available for marriage. On the coast, where the Swahili people live, traditions have Islamic and Arab influences. The old town of Lamu, for example, is transformed during the Lamu festival. This is when traditional boat races called dhows take place, along with traditional music performances and street parties that mix faith and culture. All this in a setting that seems frozen in time, with white houses and narrow limestone alleys. These festivals, in addition to maintaining the identity of the people, also reveal how much the country still lives in its past. Culture here is not a museum piece. Number 6. Gastronomy. If Kenya is diverse in its people, languages, and rituals, it couldn't be any different when it comes to sitting down at the table. The food also reflects this mix. Each region has its own style, each people has its own recipe, and even the way of eating can change from one tribe to another. The most famous dish, which appears in almost every meal, is ugali. It looks simple, a firm dough made from corn flour cooked with water, but for many people it is what sustains them throughout the day. Another classic is githeri, a mixture of corn and beans cooked together, which can be turned into a stew or mashed, depending on the region. Among the Kikuyu, a traditional people from the highlands, mukimo is what appears at parties. It is a kind of green puree made with banana, beans, and crushed leaves, served in large pots, always to be shared. On the island of Lamu, for example, where Arab influence mixes with Swahili culture, the seasoning changes. There are coconut stews, fried rice cakes, flatbread called chapati, which came from India and is now part of breakfast for half the country. And the most curious thing is that food there is not just about taste. It is also a gesture, affection, a social rule. To drink, the rule is that little cup of tea. Even though the country is one of Africa's largest coffee producers, tea is the most popular drink there. Hot with milk, just like the British taught them. The finest coffee, the one exported, is all shipped out. People who live there often don't even taste what they grow. But tea is where people come together. It is by serving a mug that a conversation begins, a deal is closed, or a problem is solved. Number 7. Places to visit. Remember we said that Kenya is the kind of country that makes you feel like you've crossed continents without leaving the place. Now you'll understand why. If there's one name that everyone associates with travel in Kenya, it's Masai Mara, a huge national reserve on the border with Tanzania. It is known for being the setting for some of the greatest scenes of wildlife in the world. Masai Mara is a direct continuation of the Serengeti, only on the Kenyan side. It is Maasai territory, open countryside, and where wildlife runs free. Further inland, the highlight is Lake Nakuru. What catches the eye here is not the water, but the shores, which are covered with thousands of flamingos. There are so many colorful birds that the lake seems to change color depending on the season. Now, What few people realize is that Kenya also has a coastline. And what a coastline! The Kenyan coast is bathed by the Indian Ocean, with beaches like Diani and Malindi that look like something out of a postcard. In Mombasa, one of the oldest cities in the country, you can still visit Fort Jesus, a 16th century Portuguese fortification, and walk through the streets of the old city, with its Swahili architecture and the smell of spices in the air. Number 8. The owners of the place. If there's one thing everyone wants to see when they set foot in Kenya, it's the animals, especially the big five: lion, elephant, buffalo, leopard, and rhino. They live right there, free, in reserves such as the Masai Mara, one of the best known in the country. They hunt, sleep, and fight, just as they did thousands of years ago. It is in this same setting that the Great Migration takes place, one of the greatest wildlife spectacles in the world. Millions of wildebeests, zebras, and gazelles cross the border into Tanzania in search of new pastures. Along the way, they face rivers, crocodiles, dust, and jostling. It's a scene from a documentary, but without a script, without an audience, and with a lot of instinct. But not everything there has a mane or horns. Kenya is full of animals that also steal the show. There are giraffes, hyenas, wild boars, hippos, and ostriches. And among so many big animals, one of the most important is one of the smallest, the dung beetle. You can laugh. The name is strange, but the work is serious. It picks up the poop of larger animals, rolls it into a ball, and pushes it with its hind legs. Sometimes it climbs on top, sometimes it stumbles, but it keeps going. From that little ball, it gets food, builds a nest, and lays its eggs. It may not seem like much, but if it weren't for the dung beetle, the savannah would be chaos. He cleans, recycles, spreads seeds, and renews the environment. Deep down, that's what Kenya is all about. A place where lions reign, but it's the dung beetle that keeps order. And when you see all this happening together in the same space, you understand why so many people travel across the world just to see it up close. It's not just a safari, it's nature in charge. Number 9. Curiosities. And of course, after learning about the location, history, people, places, animals, and even the food, we couldn't finish without mentioning some curiosities that only Kenya has. For starters, did you know that there is a Kenyan version of the famous board game Monopoly? That's right, there it's called kumiliki, which in Swahili means to own. But the local version has its own charm. Instead of plastic pieces, everything is handmade. The houses, hotels, and even the characters are carved from soapstone. The board is also different. Instead of generic streets, it features real regions of Kenya. And the dynamics follow the same spirit as the original. Players roll the dice, move around the houses, buy properties, and as the game progresses, give or collect money from other players. Everything has a local touch, but the main objective of the game remains the same. And since we're talking about surprising things, it's not just coffee that Kenya exports. The country is also the world's largest producer of roses and has become a supplier of flowers to much of Europe. Every year, millions of Kenyan roses are turned into essential oil, which is then used in luxury perfumes. One of them is Paris, created by French fashion house Yves Saint Laurent, one of the most famous brands in the world of fashion and perfumery. Now, back in the capital, there are some laws that make many people laugh, but they are still on the books. In Nairobi, for example, it is forbidden to pick your nose in public. Every building must be painted at least once a year. And if there are more than 6 people waiting at a bus stop, they are required to form a line. This is not a suggestion, it is the law. And so we end our tour of a country that is unpredictable, even for a second. where even board games become culture lessons, where cities disappear from the map without explanation, and where even queuing is a matter of order. That's what Kenya is all about. Surprise after surprise. Now it's your turn. Which of these curiosities surprised you the most? Tell us in the comments. If you enjoyed getting to know Kenya with us, leave a like, subscribe here at Bello Mundo, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next destination. Thank you very much for joining us. See you next time.